weekend, and I wanna see a show. I flip on the book of face. Yeah, I know where to go. There's a man over there into the music scene, showing lots of love for the community with great advice. I know who I should go see. So all around town radio show is where I go for the latest band info. So all around town radio show for the music that comforts my soul.
All right, everybody, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to All Around Town Radio Wednesday with the band. We're doing a nooner today, and without any further, I'm going to jump my guest right in here if I can get it to roll. Hi, Matt. Matt Waters. What's going on, man?
Nothing much. I'm happy we're doing this at noon. This is the freest of my times.
Mine too. So I'm glad we're here. It's good stuff. And I've admired you for a long time. You have a great social media presence. We're going to talk about it a little later on. But let me introduce the folks that may not know you here. Matt is an independent singer-songwriter from Cincinnati. He's opened for a bunch of people: AJR, Luke Combs, Tim Reynolds, and many others. And also has, like I said, this wonderful social media presence where he does some really cool videos that aren't really about a whole lot other than just chatting with people. And I love that. It's just a laid back chat kind of thing that you do. So Matt, we're going to get into it heavy today, but let's talk here about you and how you got started in this crazy business of online music. And when did you start playing music as a kid?
I was one of those lucky situations where none of my family plays. But I was a kid walking through a Toys R Us at 9 years old, and I told my mom, my nana, that I would want a guitar. And my grandmother was a stubborn enough woman to say, if we're buying it, you're taking lessons. So for the next 7 years of my life, she drove me to guitar lessons. Right after the lesson, she'd sit me down in the kitchen. She'd make me play all that back to her. So I had somewhere between a captive audience and a forced hobby in my life that I fell in love with at a young age. Then around 14, I started playing in bars and restaurants on family vacations. I had the kind of dad that would love to sit around and drink and tip somebody a 20 to see if I can play Jimmy Buffett with them. So I quickly kind of got indoctrinated into that style of work. And after those trips, I was coming home and just starting to find my first gigs. So I was checking out things around Cincinnati. This is the only job I've ever had. I've never worked a formal gig. I've always made my money playing music. So
wow, that's admirable as well, because most musicians I know, they hold down that day job. So you're doing the music thing, and you've got a unique style. I've watched your videos, like I said, online during the Blizzard thing the other day. Snowmageddon, you were doing some songs online and stuff, and it's just good stuff. And it seems like your mind's always working, Matt. I mean, you're always spinning on what can I talk about next? What can I do next? Where's that come from inside?
I have a dad that's a serious chatter. So I was always raised in a home where the interest in people was always kind of at the forefront. And then my love of music really stems from putting people in motion. I've always loved really danceable stuff. So I like to, trying to keep the antenna up to new ideas, new songs that might be popping up into my life, and trying to bring that to live audiences is my number one passion.
So on that note, then, do these things just pop in your head and they're like done in 5 minutes, or are some of them real long, thought processes and like putting together a tune?
I would say most of my ideas show up relatively in full. Like I'd say the muse is kind of en route, and if I can't get the whole song out in that first go at it, most of the time the idea falls flat. So trying to let inspiration hit and then come out, I think it's the ultimate refinement of the craft, is saying I can play catch with this thing because I have the facility worked out. If I hear the chord, I'm going to play the chord. If I hear the melody, I can sing the melody. And now I'm trying to figure out the recording aspect of it. So since the pandemic, I've been spending my time learning how to produce and do all this stuff from the abode of my parents' basement.
Well, let's backtrack. This guitar, and you know, you're very accomplished as well. And this guitar that you got years ago and took lessons. Do you remember the first song you ever learned to play on that guitar?
The first song that lit my world on fire, like, you learn the typical crap like "Ode to Joy" and whatnot, but it was "Rockin' Robin" by the Jackson 5. I'd never heard of the Jackson 5, and I just was playing that melody, and that's where kinda like dance music hit me for the first time. So that was we sat down in the kitchen, I wouldn't stop playing it. I wasn't being forced to recitate, something like that.
I would have never in a million years picked that song as the one you learned that you really grabbed you and learned to play. I mean, that's crazy, and it's a great tune. I mean, it's catchy. It's got that fast style to it that everybody loves. But you, it's funny because you're a humorist as well. I mean, you really don't get too uptight about anything, do you?
I'm not the type to take myself too seriously. I don't think I've really earned that place in people's life. I'm more just a goof and a character.
And what you know is that where you're reaping the benefits of the social media side? I want to talk about your social media presence, obviously, because it is more laid back. I saw a recent interview you did with Nikki Forte, or you guys just sitting talking, and she's great, and she did a good job of answering questions with you and things like that. But yeah, that to me is a style that a lot of people don't have. You know, everything is formalized. It's you know, scripted and so on. And you know, we talked before the show. I got bullet points that I want to hit on, but I don't ever script anything, because if I try to script it, it goes to hell quick. It does. And,
I can understand that, man.
you know,
I'm someone that if you give me something to read off, I'm gonna go off script regardless how much I prepare. It's just mainly in my nature to live in the moment rather than go over what you told me to.
you ever say sometimes, boy, I wasted a lot of time preparing because that interview would have been great without any prep at all. It's just, you know, one
Yeah,
of
well,
those.
I feel that way about set lists most of all. If I don't have a band that knows my whole catalog and the large slew of covers that I'll stick in the show, it's like, well, we're gonna get derailed very quickly. So thankfully, all the monstrous musicians in my life are very capable of following the idea on a whim that might pop up, and we can just run face first into it.
And I love that as well. That's one of the things that really turned me on to the Cincinnati music community, was the fact that there's so many players there. And I use the Bell and the Bear as an example a lot because of their jam night. That's one of those nights where, you know, they look at each other and like, you ever played that before? No. You ever played? No, let's try it. And then the next thing you know, it sounds like they've played it for 30 years, and they're
There's
just great
something really special
musicians.
there. I
It
mean,
is.
those Thursday nights, like how do you prepare for that as the house band? How does the Jamie Combs get in shape for that kind of thing? I think you just sit in your room with the lights off and you say, whatever happens, happens. We plow into the darkness regardless how it goes, especially someone that's a multi-instrumentalist like that.
Yeah, you're just good. I mean, that's all that I can say about that. They're just good and good at their craft, and you know, you obviously are as well. And I want to touch more though on that social media stuff, because you're doing a wide variety of things. You're on there playing your music, just you and a guitar. You promote your shows like everybody should promote their shows, I will say.
Thank you.
But you also have these little talks back and forth, and you have a podcast. I know you said it was on the YouTube channel. But how do you, I mean, how do you separate all that? Because it is all different.
Well, one of the things that I've always felt really firmly about is I don't want to be caught up doing trends on the internet to try to get followers. I only make formats of content that I enjoy doing. So whether it's playing live to a Facebook or a YouTube or something like that, very similar to a live show, but a little bit more stripped down, or the podcast, which it was really a pandemic pastime where I was doing a lot of different things. I was doing some loops, I was commenting on some clips, and then it eventually just became like an interview kind of format show. Just because how often in life do you sit down for an hour and a half and just ask your friends about the questions that you never really have time for? So I've always been very entertained by, certain podcasts that lend to that format. So I've just taken it upon myself to dig a little bit deeper with the folks I seem to only make small talk with.
Man, I love that philosophy. It's outstanding, and we need more of that, because we don't know about the people that we're surrounded around. I mean, you know, oftentimes, I guess you could refer to it more as a surface relationship you have with people. You see them, you say, hey, you're out in the club, you say, yeah, how you doing, and all that, but you never really are able to dig deep, and your interviews kind of go deep. I mean, you're able to talk about things that, what's your favorite breakfast food type thing. It's not just music, or it's not just, the chord progression in this song was really good and whatever. You guys dig deep.
Well, and I think there's a lot of moments in time where, say, someone like yourself that pours all this heart and soul into making sure the live events are attended, that people get to know artists on a different level. There's aspects of your personality that are incredibly endearing that unless you go there, people don't find that point of connection. And those small things, whether it is your favorite breakfast food and comment, or that B-side track that's always just meant the world to you, those aspects of our person help humanize relationships that stick mainly on the internet and happen mainly over text. And I think, we are lacking a little bit of that level of personability in all of our lives.
Would you think that all the new technology, the text messaging, all that has taken away from our personal connection with people? I mean, would you say that? I feel that way sometimes. I don't get a chance to actually pick up a phone and chat with anybody anymore.
As someone that's mainly grown up in the digital age, and I've always kind of had a smartphone, I've always been on the internet, there's been some really important relationships for me that just take place on X or on Facebook or on Instagram. And I'm grateful that that is a mechanism for how we can relate. But when those things hold you back from asking really personal questions or delving into messier subjects, that's where you start to kind of miss out.
And, I grew up in the era where we didn't have any of that. And I could always tell if my friends were a little off that day, if there was something going on, if they were having a rough day, but just by the look on their face, or when you talk to them on the phone, you could tell by their, not usual upbeat mannerisms that something was going on. And I think sometimes we lose a little focus on that in the world of digital technology. Don't get me wrong, the advances we've made today are fantastic in the way of what we're doing right here. I mean, no one would know you in my world if you weren't on here today. So that's a good thing. And speaking of that, let me say something real quick. Carla, thank you. Chris Reese, thank you. Sherry, Roger, Charlotte, Sean Cooper in the house, Matt Roth, thank you so much, Tier, for all stepping in today. And if you're watching, guys, throw a comment if you have a question for Matt as we talk here. I'm sure he can answer it. And if you're watching after we're live, please drop a comment in there, and we'll both be watching the feed, and we'll answer them for you. So, Matt, it's a pleasure.
A special shout out to Chris Reese. I think there's many pockets of musicians in the city that sometimes don't get to interact, and that's a guy that's shown me a lot of love and kind of brought me more into his world of what exists around the Bell and the Bear, and so many other great musicians in town that open up their corner, whether that's their favorite dive or their favorite venue.
And we were just talking about Chris yesterday with Karis and I on the show we do on Tuesdays, and how his band absolutely just smoked it on a Christmas show at the Bell and the Bear. And, every time I see that band, I love them, and I love their energy level. And they're one of those bands that we kind of mentioned early on there they have a connection to people, and you have that connection to folks. That's why you're able to get these people to come on and just sit down in a chair comfortably and talk to you. Because some people wouldn't do that. They're a little nervous about that, and you sure break the ice easy and do it. And what would your advice be to anybody new in the business, social media wise? Because this was Hot Topic Tuesday yesterday, was the fact that bands aren't using their socials to their fullest extent. They're not promoting their shows and not doing things. What would your advice be to somebody that's up and coming in the music business?
Well, I think when it comes to your content, make things that you like to make. If it's a chore, don't do it. But there's certain things that are, they're not optional. Promoting your shows, connecting with your audience. One of the things that you said about, like, in person, you can kind of tell when somebody's feeling like they should or they're feeling a little bit off. When I sit in a club and I'm playing an acoustic set, I am almost forced companionship for these people, and I get an opportunity to be very vulnerable with them and share parts of my catalog that might lead to them coming up to me on my break and saying, hey, I needed that, or you kind of just poked at something I was trying to avoid today. That type of intimacy that comes at very odd points in time is very similar to what you'll get on the podcast or what you might get in your Facebook comments. And rather than just making it a notification and a response, actually making that an avenue to get to know somebody for good or for bad a little bit more is the number one reason that you should be online. And if it's affecting you in a negative way, get the hell offline and probably find a better way to promote your band.
There you go. Well, the days of posters on the telephone poles are over. We know that, and that's those days have hence gone by. Unless you're in a walking
Depends on the
neighborhood.
pole, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some of these still have great visibility.
Yeah, well, if you're in an area where everybody's walking to everything, I guess so. But you just said something there, and that's going to be my quote of the day today for you. Forced companionship. That was a great statement because it truly does say what a solo artist has to be in a club, because you're thrust into these people's lives who may be sitting there having a drink for all sorts of reasons. Maybe they've had a rotten day, maybe they've had a great day, they're celebrating something, whatever it is, and you come into their lives, and it is kind of forced, isn't it? It's like you're there, and they have to listen a little, but maybe they do. Yeah, we hope.
And that flexibility of the set list, or your banter in between songs. Like, I'm reading you from the back of your head and hoping that you and I kind of strike a chord here that feels like when you walk out of a Monday night, or like I design called the Monthly Muse. It's a songwriters night that happens the second Wednesday of the month at Radio Artifact. This is all original music that you're subjecting yourself. Okay. And now we have this somewhat forced relationship. If you chose to sit down today and I got a song I wrote for my nephew, and I hope for some reason these things collide into the soundtrack of your life, because as a songwriter, the number one thing I want to do is put music into your life that feels like it helps push some momentum forward in the way that you're looking for.
Matt, you're full of great insight, man. I love your style and your philosophy on life, buddy. I think it's a wonderful thing. And Sherry's got a quick question here as we're talking, getting out of the social media part of it. But when is it too much on social media? I think that's an interesting question.
Well, I'm finding this out the hard way, that 99% of your audience doesn't see the post you just put up. And because of the way that people call it the TikTokification of most applications, your algorithm is based on your previous engagement. Just because someone follows your page doesn't mean they're going to see it. So if you post it twice, 3 times, 5 times, it almost doesn't matter at this point. You need to proliferate your ideas and your content so much that it's going to end up in that very unique content stream.
Yeah, and boy, that as a person who does what we do and I do, you can really go down a rabbit hole of frustration there with that. When you post something, you think, man, this is a home run post and I want everybody to love this person or whatever. And all of a sudden it's, 6 likes or whatever you get, and you've got 10,000 followers. It's like, what happened? And oftentimes that also that algorithm, I think the computers, they tend to send me messages all the time because I'll push the edge every once in a while and do something, and it's like, oh, you've been slowed down in the feed, or you're this or you're that, and that does hurt for a while. And it's tough for somebody trying to work hard to do this like we do every day. And you're doing it for a reason kind of other than what I'm doing. You're doing it for a reason. Obviously, you're promoting your own business and your own music, but I think you really dig what you're doing too. I think it's a good thing mentally for you, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the social media, it's sometimes the notification is the game you're playing. And sometimes you need to re-incentivize yourself. It's not about how much engagement, it's how many posts I put up today. I wanted to do 3, maybe I hit 4. Maybe that feels great. Like, finding ways to simplify that and create something that you find interesting and pleasurable to do is a huge part of it. So whether that's removing the boundaries of, I keep my microphone set up right here and I can walk in, I can just knock it out. That's how you make this game doable, or else you're kind of suffering through, I got to set my shit up, I got to get my microphone ready, my Wi-Fi sucks today. You have to find ways to remove the barriers of logistics and open it up for you to be creative, which is the number one reason why folks do well on these things. It's because their creativity has hit somebody and made their afternoon a little bit easier. Most of y'all are probably sitting at 9 to 5 right now, looking at a lunch that you probably shouldn't have microwaved for as long as you did. And I'm just here to make you giggle and maybe bring you out to a show. It doesn't matter.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And Carla, thanks for that. Yes, music is a beautiful language, and that's why we do it here. I mean, that's what I love music, and I love what music does for me. And Sherry says one more thing on the socials here. Matt, do you follow a schedule of what you post? And that's another great question, Sherry.
I try not to keep it too clockwork because I find that that can bore me, but there's certain non-negotiables in my life. I do my gigs this week on a Monday or a Tuesday just to make sure that if someone wants to share a video of me talking about their venue, it's available to them. Then I use certain things, like there's an application called Opus that will take my podcast and help me build clips. So clip the show, caption it, and then I can start to post those on a schedule. So I don't have to be looking at my phone all day. And then if you see me doing a performance clip where I'm sitting there with an acoustic or I'm playing guitar in my studio here, that normally just happened. And that's just the whim that's going on and feeling creative with that song or wanting to promote. So it's it's somewhere between regularly scheduled programming that I can get in front of and partly leaving space for myself to enjoy making something, like I said.
I'm glad you said Opus because I have a friend who does international social media. He's very well known. He talks about basically young investors and things like that. And he said, if you're not using Opus clips, you're a fool, is what he told me. He said, you need to get into that. And then I've had several musicians kind of mention it on the bigger level. And I thought, maybe I take that dive and give it a try and see what it'll do for a while, because it just seems to me like it's a great way of drawing out the right things out of what you had in an hour-long show and making them highlights, which we really all need to do. And you just don't find the time to do it,
Exactly. It's such a chore, and you don't have the man hours to be competitive in a world where other people are using these tools. Like, it's one of the few points creatively that when you talk about AI and its place in your life, if you're not utilizing it, you're falling behind. And you're only capable of so much. And that might be your style. You might say, I'd rather put up one post a week, but that's going to feel right for me. You can follow your gut in that. But I will say 99% of your audience isn't going to see the post you made today. So you might as well make 3 of them. You might as well make 2 of them.
Amen to that. And Sherry's got one. Sherry, I have seen the show today has turned into, we should do a show, Matt, together on social media, because Sherry's got a lot of questions. A lot of people do. Her last question was, what platform do you think is the most effective? That's one that I get asked a lot. And what do you think?
It depends on your audience. Certain styles of content are going to pop off more on certain platforms. But I think there's generation gaps between certain places. TikTok is probably going to be the widest lens, but who knows if TikTok's going to continue that way. YouTube tends to be a little less age specific, but you get certain styles of users. So I think the real goal here is find programs like Opus, find ways to make your content that you can keep dumping it onto all these platforms and see what proliferates, because I've had tons of things that I'll post on Facebook. It's a dud. I post on Instagram. It's a dud. But TikTok ate it up. Does that mean it's going to be the same tomorrow? No. But in the game of posting on social media, that means I got the thumbs up at least somewhere, and I'm going to come back and take another swing at it.
All right. Well, there you have the social media side of Matt Waters, everybody. Let's segue into your past and current projects, things you've been proud of in the past and things you're working on now.
Well, like I said, during 2020, I started to learn how to produce myself. I think the era of home studios has really arrived, and certain quality changes between live drums in a big room versus programmed drums on your computer makes less of a difference than just putting songs into people's lives. The best sandwich is obviously going to be a Reuben. You got to go with something with a really light crust. Make it really delectable. You want to get a Dijon mustard, something on the darker side, and make sure it's an even spread. You don't want to go past more than a millimeter on each side of the bread. Going back to what I was talking about for production's sake, though, you just want to make sure that you have the opportunity to be creative and get rolling with it. So I have some new singles that I'm getting ready to roll out, a particular song that I'm a huge fan of called What's Gonna Stop Me. We just filmed a video back for that. So getting ready to drop some new music, but I want to make sure I have other things loaded and ready to go in that regard. So there's probably going to be 5 or 6 new singles this year. And then I got a live album that we're filming on January 25th at Radio Artifact. That's going to feature probably 14 songs, my band, The Recipe, in its fullest form. I think it's a 7-piece or an 8-piece band, and we'll have Apostle Jones opening up the show. So a lot of great online content's coming downstream, and I just have to stay in a good place where I'm not over-caffeinated or under-caffeinated to make sure it all hits the internet.
Gotcha. Well, you've got a lot going on.
Oh, yeah, a lot of caffeine.
Yeah, so Matt, you said you grew up in the era of you've always had a smartphone. It's always been social media and all that for you. What were some of your musical influences growing up? Who were some of the people you admired and why?
Well, my first guitar teacher that I spent the most time with was a Beatles nut. And so the first time I dug into individuals in the full extent of their career was all Beatles oriented. For a while, George was my favorite, then John was my favorite. Now I've kind of come to the immaculate conclusion that Paul has to be the greatest Beatle, and if you disagree, fight me. Let's do something about it. But in the last couple years, my number one and maybe my one and only is Prince. I can't get enough of his catalog. Like, I never heard this album called The Truth that someone sent me on Instagram the other day. And it's just Prince playing acoustic with some really some really dated but sweet effects going on in the background. So I just think he's the ultimate creative, the ultimate instrumentalist. Just so many parts of his person that I want to bring into my own work.
So that leads me, and we're going to go into a final question. I think I may have just learned the answer, but I want to know one more thing about you. Where do you get this this charisma, this on microphone quickness and rapid answers and all the things you do? I mean, you're just an amazing interview. So where do you get this? Does this come from younger days? Does it come from lately? I mean, how's that happen?
I think I got the advantage that my entire life is spent on a microphone. And I also grew up the youngest of 4 kids. So for a lot of my life, I was the quiet one, and I was kind of the butt of the jokes of my siblings. But thankfully, so I got 2 older brothers, then an older sister right above me. And my sister has always been this louder than life character. I remember when she was in high school, I would watch her lead pep rallies dressed as a nun, doing a cartwheel on a basketball court. And that type of mania kind of got bestowed on me through her. And it's just become who I want to be on stage. You know, there was a long time where I would stand still and I was too nervous. And then someone saw me shaking a little bit. They're like, looks like you're about to start dancing. And I was like, well, why don't I just start letting loose a little bit? So I've learned a lot of my my energy and my ramblings can be utilized in this one place. So anymore, I just go for it. No regrets. I'm going to say something ridiculous. I might regret it, but I'm going to post it. Let's just let it fly.
Do you have a favorite playing music or doing a podcast, or do you have anything that's more pleasurable to you?
I love playing above all things, but I'd say most of my life is spent doing the solo acoustic thing. So if you give me a stage and my setup and a crowd that wants to talk back and forth, there's nothing like having a conversation with an audience and being able to pivot that into a song. And by the time that song's done, I can go with somebody else's idea. It's almost like having a musical Q&A that can go on. And again, you're trying to read people's lives. If you like this love song, well, I'm sure you need a breakup song every once in a while. So let's take this swing. If you got that, let's go with this weird funk tune that I think is going to add a little zest to your Wednesday afternoon.
Well, sadly, Matt, I have to admit I've never seen your solo show, and I need to, obviously. Is this as interactive as it seems to me in my head that it is when you're there with an audience, that you're doing this dialogue back and forth and then playing this music? Does that what happen at every solo show for you?
Well, sometimes people aren't looking for that kind of conversation, but if you give me the opportunity to get in your life and really do this, then it's much to my advantage. It's what I prefer to do.
Thank you, Tier. Confidence is a great word to describe Matt. It is, because he has that confidence level. And just from the minute we got on here prior to the show, I could tell that he's just a pro at all this. And it's Matt, it's really fun to talk to people like you, because you've done interviews. I know you've had people on that it is like extracting a tooth to get them to answer your questions. Some people just, you throw a great question at them, they sit there and it's like, and this dead air happens. You're not that guy. You're quick-witted. You have the ability, just like you jumped into the Reuben sandwich there. Thank you, Chris Reese, for that, by the way.
To be honest with you, I've never had a Reuben as well. It might have been a lie, but I'll at least go with it. But
it sounded good. It sounded great. You made it
I'll
believable.
Give it a chance. I mean, yeah. I'm not as experienced in the sandwich category as I might be as my musical abilities.
Well, and if it's mentioned on the internet, it's always true, isn't that right?
Facts.
Everywhere we have facts.
Listen, when I go poking people on Facebook, it's because I have malicious intentions. So watch your feed. I'll be on you.
Go any day. We'll have fun with it. Live album coming up, you said. Let's recap that again, if we can.
Yeah, January 25th, we're cutting our third live album at Radio Artifact over in Northside. I'd say this is the best sounding room in the city. We're taking things to the next level this year. So we have a couple of VIP tables. We also have some standing room tickets so you can get at the door. You can find that later on. It'll be on Spotify, all the streaming platforms. And then we have our friends Apostle Jones coming down from Cleveland, one of the most highly rated funk bands in Cleveland. They're going to be opening up the show. They are spectacular. So that's all going to start probably around 7 o'clock on the 25th. Again, you can get tickets at the door. You can get them online on my website, mattwatersmusic.com. And then we got a huge tour schedule coming up later in the year. I'm going to drop my solo acoustic tour schedule as well as my band tour. But we have an amazing show coming up at the Bell and the Bear on February 15th. Everyone loves playing at the Bell. It's an honor in the city to get to do that because you have listeners of a different caliber. And you also have an openness for a little rowdiness of a show. And there's popcorn to bring people back a notch if you need to. So
the Musicians Clubhouse, as Chris Reese refers to it. I agree.
You make that that statement.
Yeah, that's good. And you can follow Matt on all the socials, guys, YouTube, Instagram, X, all those things, and Facebook as well at Matt Waters Music. If you'd like to, please go give him a follow. And I'm sure, as Tierra said here, we have piqued her interest today. So she's going to come see you play soon. And I want to get to a solo show too, because I want to be that guy that's sitting there with the beer that says, man, will you play me a breakup song or something? And I want to hear you do it.
If you give me generic categories like that, that's where I thrive the most. That's where my weird really comes out. And if I can make one last appeal to your audience and just saying that the local musicians in your life, whether they're playing out once a month, whether they're playing out a couple times a week like me, we are putting ourselves out there to be the physical and the musical companionship in your life that you might be looking for. Whether you just need someone to be there with you on good and bad days, or whether you're looking for the catalog that's going to soundtrack your life through whatever you're going through at this time. This scene is here for you. And an artist like myself, I've made the choice and the dedication to say, until they put me in a box, this is what I'm going to do. You don't need to worry about that question. If you lean on me, you got something to find here. So I appreciate you.
Well said, Matt Waters. And last question here of the day, guys, before we have to go, because we've already had Chris Reese have to go back to work. We've exceeded our lunch half hour here. Matt, if you could take the stage with anyone, past or present, and play one show with them, who would it be?
What I would want most, if I could time travel, is Prince does his album, The Piano and a Microphone Tour. And the recorded version of this is him rehearsing at Paisley Park. And so it's just him sitting there with a mic, a piano, and I'm pretty sure they mic'd up his foot because his foot's the most grooving kick drum I've ever heard. He's just stomping on the stage. If I could walk out there with an acoustic and just join that man for a little bit, no audience, just me and the maestro, you could put me in the box right after that. I'd be good. That's everything.
And I'm going to say, out of every musician I've ever interviewed, and there's hundreds of them, Prince is up there in the rankings in the top, at least top 3 that people answer that question. And we ask that question in every interview. So obviously Prince made a big impact on a lot of people. He did on me. And I was playing music in the clubs. I was spinning records. I was spinning Prince's first vinyl, Want to Be Your Lover, those kind of things, back in the day. So good stuff. And
I got a 1978 pressing of that self-title. And one of my favorite things about buying used records is hearing the wear points of where people have kind of dropped in. And you can hear this major glitch at the instrumental breakdown at the back half of that song. So I'd like to think that was used on the more hip-hop side for MCs getting after it in the day.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, I can't thank you enough. You've been a wonderful guest on the show today. I always follow your stuff. I love watching what you do. Your interviews, I learn from every time I watch them. And I've been doing this a long time. I won't get into that. I've been doing this 30 years thing. But I do, and I learn from you every day. You're a force. You're definitely a shining light in the music community. And can't wait to see you. Hopefully see you at the Bell and the Bear for that show and some other places out and about town.
Hey, you always got a free ticket at the door, Scott. You come to whatever you want. Friends, thanks for taking the time. Make sure you continue to tune into Hall Around Town. This is a special program with a maniac behind the wheel.
Thank you, Matt. I love you, man. Thanks so much for being with us today. We're going to get out of here, guys. Don't forget tomorrow live at 5. It's Who's Playing Out, brought to you by our friends at Heathers in Springboro. And we're giving you the best musicians and venues in the tri-state and who's playing where all week long. Matt Waters, have a great day, my friend.
Appreciate you. Peace, players.
See you soon, folks. Bye-bye. Thank you, Carla.